Okay, Megumi, you want to turn your camera and your mic on? Let's see. Hello. So remind me, because it's been a while, you go by Grace, right? You're still, is your microphone on? I can't hear you. Or am I having problems with my speak? Can you hear me okay? Okay, well, I can't hear you. I wonder why. Because it doesn't say you're mute. Oh, yeah, you are muted. So unmute your mic. You know how to unmute your mic? Unmute your mic and talk to me for a minute so I know I can hear you. Because I'm going to be asking you some questions as we go tonight. Ah, come on. There we go. I heard a ding anyway. Oh, you typed a reply in. Why has this got you muted? Okay, do me a favor. Up at the top of your screen, next to the red button that says leave, you see the thing that looks like a microphone that's got a line through it? Click on that. All right, now talk to me and see if I can hear you. No, I'm still not hearing you. Okay, you apparently just have an issue with your microphone. We'll get through it. I'll just have to know if I ask you a question specifically, I got to go look at the chat so I can see you reply to me. Okay, so anyway, I have the recording going, which is a good thing because I initially had started talking and forgot to hit the record button. So it is 6:13 now on Wednesday evening, the 10th of November, and we're going to get started. I have Grace here with me this evening. I haven't seen Victoria yet, but if you are a student that is signed up to be in this class as far as actively in the class, then you need to be in the class. And there's a couple of you that fall into that category. I won't call you out here on the video, but I'm going to send you an email and call you out because you need to be here. That's the way you're signed up for the class. And that's the way that I'm supposed to conduct the class and report it. And the bottom line is the more folks that we have that are actually online with us watching the videos and, or excuse me, that are online as we do the videos, the better the instruction is going to be. Because I think most all of you guys have had me in class before, and you know that I prefer to have two-way conversations. It just makes things a whole lot easier when we're trying to cover information. So if you're supposed to be in the class, then please do so. And we will try to get moving forward here. So last week, I'm assuming that all of you have had a chance to watch the video. I apologize for getting it posted late. I thought I had it posted on Wednesday evening. And one of the students sent me an email and said, hey, I can't find the video. And when I went back and looked, apparently when I saved it, it didn't save. I don't know if that was my error or if it was a Canvas thing, but the bottom line is we got it reposted. So Grace, were you able to watch the video for last week? Okay, so it is there and you guys can see it now. Good. So anyway, we will move forward and just a quick review, for the class. You guys know you've got papers that are due. The first papers I think are due tomorrow. Well, in fact, you know what? I've got that section up right now. So let me look real quick. Assignments. The first paper is, the first paper is due by midnight on the 11th. And then again, like I was saying in the video, The nice thing about the next assignment, which is the classroom presentation, you don't have to do any additional research. You've already read the book and you've written a paper. Basically, all you have to do is make a short video on what you got. Basically, a short video that tells us about the book report or about the paper you wrote. You don't have to read the paper. In fact, please don't read the paper. But basically what I want you to do is kind of distill it down and hit the high points of what's in your paper as to what you got from reading the book. And again, 5 to 8 minutes. Most of you guys can talk about what you had for supper last night for that long. So it shouldn't be a difficult assignment. Probably the most difficult part is going to be for you guys just figuring out how to get it recorded. What I will tell you is if you have a YouTube channel and you want to record it on YouTube, by all means do, and just send me a link for that YouTube. If you don't have a YouTube channel and you just want to use Teams, all you have to do is come into the Teams channel for our class and go up on the top right hand side. You know, when you're in the channel by yourself, just go up on the top right hand side and click meeting or meet. And start now, and basically you're the only one there. Make sure you hit the 3 little dots at the top so you record it, and record your presentation that's 5 to 8 minutes long. And when we get back off of the Thanksgiving break, we're gonna look at a couple of those videos. I'm probably not gonna look at all of them, but we'll at least look at some of them so that some of your classmates can kind of get an idea of what it is you got from reading the book. Because everybody that reads it's going to get something a little bit different. I guarantee you, I got something different from reading it than all the rest of you will. So we'll do that. And then again, a little bit of housekeeping stuff. We'll just do that right up front this evening and get that done and out of the way for the week of Thanksgiving. We are not going to have a class on that Wednesday because I know most of you will already be on the road going somewhere for Thanksgiving. If not, if you're still in the dorm because you're not going anywhere, okay. Take advantage of the fact that we don't have a class, and whether you're working on this class or whether you're working on another class, take advantage of that time and get yourself caught up. The bottom line is this. Though we don't have a class that week, there is still a paper that's due that week. Okay, if you've got that paper done and want to get it turned in early before you take off, by all means, there are no issues in this class at all with you working ahead as you read the book and get your papers done, get them turned in, and we'll be good to go. I did put a discussion question up last week. Based on the subject of the final assignment, and do you guys want to do a paper based on that third book that you're reading, or do you want to do a personal financial plan? And again, if we decide to go with a personal financial plan, I will be the only one that sees those, so don't worry about any personal information that you might put in it getting out. It'll come to me. I will see it, and that'll be it. In fact, once I see it and grade it and get it back to you, as soon as this class is done, I will go in and manually delete all of those from the Canvas records so that they don't even get, they're not even in Canvas once the class is done. Once the class is done and the final grades are in, I will go in and delete those so that any data that's there, again, I'm the only one that can see that data as your instructor, but I will go in and delete that data so that, if for some reason Canvas had an issue, it just won't even be there, period. Okay. Grace, did you have any questions at this point so far on what we're doing in the class? Okay, I just wanted to make sure, since you're the only one here, you get picked on this week like Victoria got picked on last week. So maybe that's why she decided not to come tonight. Maybe she got tired of getting picked on. So anyway, I will go ahead and get us started into the lesson. It will not be a full 3 hours this evening. I understand, by the time you get to Wednesday evening, the week's gotten long. The reality is it's been a long week for me as well. So we won't go all the way until 9 o'clock. I'm a firm believer, and I have a certain amount of material that I need to present to you. And we will go as long as it takes to present that material. If that's 2.5 hours, great. If it's 3 hours, so be it. But I don't think it'll be 3 hours tonight. So anyway, let me see if I can get my slides up here real quick. Okay, and now let me try to share this slide. Oh, hang on, where'd we go? Where'd we go? It didn't go where it was supposed to. There we go. Now let me try to share the slide. Okay, Grace, give me a thumbs up if you see a slide that says, how do we define success, and a girl with a yellow sign next to her? Can you see that? Okay. I always have to ask because I can't see what you guys see. So I always have to ask and make sure that I punch these buttons right. Okay, so just a real quick review from last week. We ended up talking on inflation, and I don't know how much you guys like watching the news, or whether you watch the news. I'm a news junkie. I like to watch the news, and the thing of it is, I like to watch all the news. I watch Fox News and NBC News and CBS News because I like to get the story from all of the different angles. But I'm a news junkie, and it's kind of difficult at this point in what's happening in our nation to be able to cover some of the stuff that we're covering and not see it when you're watching the news. I mean, inflation and what causes inflation and the news. Now it always amazes me when you hear these guys that are news guys, the broadcasters, and they try to define and describe what inflation is to us. Some of them get it pretty close, and some of them don't have any clue at all. They're just reading some script that somebody put in front of them, and whoever wrote that script was totally clueless. Okay, because yes, when we look at inflation as a consumer, we see it as rising prices. But the reality is that inflation is not just rising prices. Rising prices are really more of a symptom of inflation. It's kind of like you get cold. The cold is the virus that's in your body that's running rampant. The sneezing and the runny eyes and the itchy eyes and all of that stuff, that's just the symptoms of your body trying to fight that infection. Well, higher prices a lot of times is just simply the symptom of the inflation. The bottom line is inflation ultimately is a devaluation of our money. And there are a number of different things that can cause that. We talked about that last week about cost push, where companies have the cost for companies to do business goes up, and the companies then have to push those costs to us in order to stay up and continue to make money. Because bottom line is that's the reason people are in business, is to make money. Now you got some nonprofits, and the reality is even nonprofits have to make money. They just have to spend all the money they make so that they're not making a profit. Makes you say, okay. But then we also have a cost pull inflation. And that's where basically we've got money out there, and there's more people with more money than there is goods to fill it. And as a result, the people are willing to, because they have more money, and maybe there's limited supplies of the things they want. They're willing to spend more money to get whatever it is they want, which kind of pulls those prices higher, because the bottom line is the reason we're in business is to make money. And if the suppliers out there know that, or the merchandise guys out there know that they've got a limited supply and they've got more buyers than they do supply, they're going to charge as much money as they can make during that time period, because they know that later they may end up having a whole bunch of extra stock on the shelf and people not having the money to buy it. So they're always out to make a dollar as well. So as we have more people trying to buy stuff and a limited supply, that pulls the prices higher. And then the third one, and the one that really is the most common, because it has happened to every government forever, and is the reason why a lot of governments have fallen. And the thing of it is that they fall before they even realize they have a problem. Being at Calvary, we study and know an awful lot about the Romans and their conquering of the Mediterranean area and everything around Jerusalem. But the reality is, years later, the actual fall of the Roman government can be traced back to inflation, and the Roman government trying to put more money in the system than the system could support. So there are a lot of folks that will trace the fall of the Roman Empire. There's other things involved, don't get me wrong, but there's a lot of folks that will trace the fall of the Roman Empire back to inflation. So quick rundown on the major topic of last week was inflation. So as we move forward, we're going to move forward, and how do we define success? Okay. Now you will find that I did not put a definite, in some classes, like if you've been in my management leading and leadership class, or my cutting issues in business, we start off with a bunch of definitions in those classes, and I put very specific definitions up on the slides. But the reality is, when you're talking about personal finance, consumer finance, and personal and family finance, there is no one definition that works for everybody involved in the process. Everybody has a different definition. It's a common thing when you talk to economists, or when you talk to people who deal with economists. They'll tell you that if you ask 10 different economists for their opinion on something, you're going to come away with 15 different answers. And we say that jokingly, but the reality is that's true. Because some economists don't even know their own opinion, and they'll give you 2 or 3. Okay, so everybody has to define what is success for them, and it's going to be a little bit different. I have put a few things down here on the slides, though, and one of the things that when you start to define, to figure out those things, okay, and there are a lot of them, and by no means the stuff that we're going to talk about today do we exhaust that list. Okay, we talk about quite a few of them, but we don't come anywhere close to exhausting that list. But the reality is that life's full of a lot of wonderful changes and events. Okay, Grace, get ready to do some typing, because I'm going to ask you a couple of questions. Okay, as we start looking at different things that happen in our life, unfortunately, some things that happen in our life are good, and some of the things that happen in our life is good. Unfortunately, some of the things that happen in our life is not so good. Okay, and we got to recognize that sometimes if we can affect the little things in our lives and control them, the small events, if we can fix them when they're small events, that we can hold off and prevent them from becoming large events that can negatively impact us. Okay, but if we fail to adjust to some of the different things that's happening in our life, that's going to cause us problems in the long run. Even the positive things happening in our life financially can cause us problems. There are some of you that are in this class that are married, okay? And I would hope to say anyway that getting married was a positive thing. But the reality is financially getting married gets expensive. And uh-oh, is your roommate beating you up back there? Anyway, so there's a lot of things that happen through our life. So Grace, before I go to this next slide, I kind of flipped through it a second ago. So that affect us and our finances, our personal finances. Okay. And I'm going to see if I can figure out how to get myself to a point where I can see your responses. I am playing with this as we go. So if I click off of something and lose you, I'll come back to you. So there are a lot of different events that happen in our life. Like one of them that I mentioned just a minute ago is getting married. Okay, that's an event that will affect our finances as we go through life. Okay, sometimes good, sometimes positively, sometimes negatively. And what can be a good event in our lives if we don't adjust to the changes in our finances can negatively affect us. Okay, but what are some of the things in life financially that's going to affect your let's put it this way. Tell me a couple of things that you see that's going to happen in the next 5 years that's going to affect your finances. And then tell me a couple of things that may happen in 10 years that's going to affect your finances. And you guys that are listening on the video, you guys should kind of be doing, at least thinking through this same process. Okay. And I'm gonna, like I said, my next slide, I'm gonna put some things up that I just kind of went down the list of different things that popped into my head because I asked myself that same question. Finding a job, yeah, that one's definitely going to affect your finances because without it, you ain't got no finances, do you? Well, and I'll say that finding a job, that doesn't have to be just after you get out of school. That can be even now while you're in school. So, all right, let me flip this slide real quick. And these is the first thing that came to my mind, and probably because when I moved from Kansas City back down here to Texas, this is the two things I had to do. I had to buy a house down here in Texas, and I had to sell my house up there in Missouri. So those are two things that were boom. I mean, and they were big things financially. Okay, right there in front of me. But then I got to thinking, okay, I'm talking to a bunch of students that are 18, 19, 20, 21. Most of you are between 18 and 25 anyway. So what are the kinds of things that's going to affect you guys? Okay. So I just got to thinking, a lot of you, if you're not already married, a lot of you in the next few years will most likely be getting married. That's just that's a. I started to say that's a fact of life. It's not a fact of life, but it's a common factor in life that most folks today are getting married in that 18 to 25 age bracket. Okay, so marriage is one. And one of the things that we're going to hit on tonight is transportation, specifically car ownership, buying a car. Okay. hopefully after you've gotten married, there's whether it's a birth of a child or an adoption of a child, but your family's growing. In my case, most of you guys know that I've got a pretty bad back. One of the things that happened on everybody's mind right now, and there's some folks that get the COVID and get right over it, but there are some folks that get COVID and they have long-term issues. There are other folks that have other medical issues, and one that comes to mind for me right off the top is Coach Regehr. She's constantly having to deal with the medical issues, and she's right up front and talks about it, and so I don't feel bad, bringing her up. But she has long-term financial considerations that she has to make as it comes to her finances because of her health. And again, then I got back to kind of thinking on my own there for a little bit, and I'm here in a couple of days, real short few days. I'm actually going to hit the big 60. I'm going to be 60 years old now. My granddaughters, they tell me I'm officially going to be old because 60 is old. So, but when you get to be 60 years old, you start thinking about the fact that you probably know a few folks that have had some issues with a spouse that's died. Or maybe if not died, the disability and illness, maybe there's a long-term disability and illness with the spouse instead of with yourself. But then again, then I went, okay, it's not about me, so go back to the students, okay? But getting the job, that's what Grace mentioned a while ago when I was asking. Or maybe a change in job. Maybe you had a good job, but you found another job, or you get a promotion on your job. Because getting a promotion is a good thing. But then what do we do with that additional money? Because we've been used to living on a specific amount of money. Now we've got more money. And how do we allocate that additional money? In a lot of extra. So taking all of that into consideration, what are you going to do with it? And oh, by the way, now you guys are at college, okay? You're at Calvary, but higher education needs. Are you there getting a 2-year, degree, an associate's degree? Are you getting a 1-year certificate? Are you working on a 4-year degree? Some of you might even consider going on towards a master's degree. All of those things have to come into play in calculation. Okay. How many of you have parents that are starting to get a little older? Now, hopefully, at your age, they're not getting too old. Most of them are going to be about my age because I got kids older than you all. Okay, so actually, I got grandkids that's going to be your age before long. I mean, reality is, I've got a granddaughter that's closer to your age, Grace, than my daughter. Okay. So you fall kind of right in between the two of them for me. But there, I mean, aging grandparents is something that has to be considered. Getting closer to retirement. Now, at your age, you're like, man, retirement's so far off. I ain't worried about getting closer. Yeah, every day we get a day closer. But the reality is, and this is, I do have one person that's going to come in and be a guest speaker for us in our class. It's going to be next week, and she's going to talk to us on that first area, those first two areas up there on buying and selling a home. So she's going to come in and talk to us about all of the things that are involved between selecting a realtor and finding somebody that's going to, unless you guys are independently wealthy, and I didn't know of any students at Calvary that were. So I don't think you're going to pay cash for your house. So you're probably going to the right home, and talking to you about credit scores and debt and all of that stuff and how it all plays together in that process. But the reality is, getting back to our list here, when we start talking about getting closer to retirement age, the sooner that you can start putting money away for retirement, the less money you have to put away each week, each month, each year, depending on what period of time that we're talking about. In my case, I put money away every month. I get the job that I got down here, I get paid once a month. And before I ever get my paycheck, I've got it set up so they take savings out and put it right into my retirement account, my 401k money, so that I never even see it. And once they take the money out, then I get my paycheck, and then my budget then is established off of my paycheck. What do I actually bring home? So that way I'm not thinking about, well, I'm bringing this money home, now I got to go save this much money. No, I have that money put away before I ever get my paycheck, so I don't even have to worry about that. Okay. I'm sure you guys have been watching the television over the past couple of weeks, and you can't help but see all of the different commercials that's talking about the healthcare and the fact that it's open enrollment right now. And everybody's got to be done with it by the 7th of December, because that's when open enrollment closes for the government healthcare stuff. The bottom line is the cost of healthcare goes up. Well, when if we look at it, reduction in your healthcare benefits, well, it goes back up to number 8, where we talk about getting a job, maybe losing a job. A lot of that's tied in together in the society, as we have and we're looking at possibly moving and taking a different job. It's not just the job that you're doing, or not just the paycheck that you're receiving, but you got to take into consideration the health insurance benefits and all of the other stuff that goes along with it. And kind of tying back to number 10 with the aging parents, as we have parents or grandparents that die, do we get some kind of an inheritance? And if we do, then what do we do with that inheritance? Is it, do we go out and throw a party, or do we take that money and use it wisely and maybe pay off some debt? Maybe do a combination of things and paying some debt off and putting some money away. Just as I was going down this list, one of the things that all of this kind of calculates into when we do a financial plan or a budget. All of these types of things come into play into that. But when I think about an inheritance, one of the things that comes to my mind is, do we have what I call emergency money? And that is money that you have that's available to you, that you put away, whether you've put it in a coffee can, whether you've stuffed it under your mattress, whether you have it in the bank. Good evening, Victoria. But money that you've put away that you don't mess with, you leave it there. It's not calculated into your monthly budget. But if you have a major expense for your automobile, or you fall and break your leg, and you got a major medical expense, and you got a unexpected expense that comes out, that's going to mess your monthly budget up. That's the reason you have that emergency fund. That, or if there is some unexpected one of the big things that I counsel young folks on when they're looking at putting together a budget, yes, we always want you to save. Yes, you need to have that emergency money. Yes, you need to look at putting money into some type of a retirement. But I caution students or young folks that, putting a bunch of money into savings while we're also acquiring maybe school loans and debts in that manner, many times is not being smart with our money, because when we get those school loans and those other debts, usually debts are going to have a higher interest rate than the interest rate we're making on the money that we're saving. So the reality is, when it comes to the interest rate, sometimes we're falling behind, where if we've got some money in emergency funds, enough that can cover us for 2 or 3 months, then it might be smarter to, instead of continuing to put money in an emergency fund, to now take that money and put it towards those debts that we have and pay off that higher debt. And then once that's paid off, or at least paid way down, then we start looking at putting the money into savings. So, just a bunch of stuff to consider there as we start looking at. And again, the question was, how do we define success? Well, it's going to be defined a little differently for everybody, because all of these things at some point in our lives are going to come into play. Well, maybe some people may not ever get married, but 99% of all this stuff is going to come into play at some point in our life. But it doesn't always come into play in the same order. For all of us, for most of us anyway, it's going to come into play in a little bit different order, and we have to be able to adjust and change fire as we go. Okay, so let's talk about debt for a little bit. Okay. Okay, not yet. So anyway, debt. Debt, obviously, I shouldn't say that, obviously. There are some people that may or may not even know what debt is. Debt is where we owe somebody else. Debt's not always a monetary thing. Sometimes we can owe somebody a debt of service. And that's where I end up, being a lot of times, I'll get somebody to come do something for me and say, I'll tell them, hey, if you'll come and do this for me, then the next time you're doing, something, I'll come give you a hand. So a lot of times I end up finding myself having a debt of service, where I've promised my time and my service to somebody in order to make up for where they've come and helped me. One of our goals should always be to be debt free. Scripture tells us that it is much better to operate debt free. However, slight pause, Scripture does not tell us that we can never go into debt. Okay, especially in the Old Testament times, there was debt. There was actually, there's actually Scripture that addresses how the Jewish nation is to handle debt, and when it's to be repaid, and how it's to be repaid. So if you get to looking in the book of Numbers and the book of Deuteronomy, there's specifics in there that lay out for us how we're supposed to handle debt, at least specifically for the Hebrew nation, as they were a fledgling nation and they were growing after having come out of Egypt. So Scripture, and I've had a number of folks tell me that we need to manage our debt, and what we need to do is make sure that our debt doesn't manage us. We need to make sure that our debt is something that we can handle, and we don't get ourselves so far into debt that then the process of paying the debt, then we end up having, it's that we can't have two masters thing. We can't have the Lord as our master if we're serving another master, and if our debt is so high that that is all consuming and all we're thinking about and doing to pay off our debt, that can cause us problems. Okay. How many of you guys know what the national debt is? Now, this is an old slide that I pulled from another class that I taught, because this, if you look at this, Grace, can you see my cursor moving? Okay. So this says we got $10 trillion in debt. Well, the reality is right now it's about $28 trillion in debt. Okay. But and this was just a snapshot in time when I built this class of, or not this class, but a class where I used this slide about 7 or 8 years ago. Okay. That in fact, this whole slide. So this is even an older picture than when I did this slide, because this says 10 trillion. But when I did the slide, it was 15 trillion, and now it's 28 trillion. And I don't know if you guys even have the concept of what $1 trillion is. But if you look at it, to get 1 million, you have to have 1,000 thousands, because that's 999.99. So 1,000 thousands to get 1 million. To get 1 billion, you have to have 1,000 millions. So to get 1 trillion, you have to have 1,000 billions. That's a whole lot of money. I saw, now I don't know how true this is because I haven't done the math to figure it out. But I saw a thing, a news article the other day that said if you took $100 bills and you stacked them up and made stacks of $1,000, and you put those $100 bills, $1,000 stacks end to end, okay, that $1 trillion would stretch from New York all the way across the northern part, from New York City, all the way across the northern part of America to Portland, Oregon, and from Portland, Oregon, all the way down the West Coast to San Diego, and from San Diego all the way across the southern border, literally tracing the line of the southern border all the way down to Brownsville, Texas, and from Brownsville, Texas, all the way around the Gulf Coast over to Miami, Florida, and from Miami, Florida, back up to New York City. But it would do that 3 times. Now think about how big a $100 bill is. And it's stacked in $1,000. So you got 1,000 thousands to get 1 million. Well, now you got another 1,000 thousands to get 2 million, another 1,000 thousands to get 3 million, to a point where you got to have 1,000 millions to get 1 billion. That's a whole lot of money. Okay? And that's what our national debt is. The interesting thing, and the reason I posted this clock, is at the time that this was done, it was $10 trillion. But then that, if you look at that, if you put a comma right here, that meant for every family, there was $86,000 in debt for every family. Now that's a national debt. It's not your personal debt. National debt to equate to $80,000 in debt. That's just mind-boggling for me. Okay. Think back to, I'm going to go back to these slides real quick. Think back to this slide, okay? That house, okay? Now, I don't know a whole bunch of us that can afford a $500,000 house or $1 million house, but $100,000 back in 2000, that was not a whole lot of money. Excuse me, that wasn't an extravagant amount of money for a house. In fact, in 2000, I was in the process of beginning to plan to build a house because I was going to retire from the Army. So my house that I built was a little over $200,000 by the time I bought the land and built the house. So I had about a $200,000 house. Okay. So the money that $200,000 house would have cost me in 2000. Today, if you double that, because I have 200,000 and not 100,000, we're talking about $316,000 for that same house because of inflation. Okay, so let's now jump back up here to this slide. Okay, The reality is debt and inflation is affecting this as well. Okay. So questions to ask yourself: are you in debt? Okay. Well, we all know if we're in debt or not, because if we owe somebody, we are in debt. Okay. If we bought a house, if we bought a car, and we haven't paid them off, we owe somebody. We're in debt. Okay. But what I should have probably put on this slide is your debt a problem? Okay. And then we start asking ourselves some questions. So are we having trouble making ends meet? You know, do we have more bills at the end of the month than we have money to pay them? If so, then our debt is controlling us instead of us controlling our debt. Okay. Are we getting behind on our monthly bills where we're choosing to pay this bill and making this bill wait because we don't have enough money? Again, if so, then our debt's probably controlling us. Okay. Do you consider payday as an exchange day? Basically, where somebody's paying you and you're just simply paying somebody. You never really hold the money. All you're doing is exchanging it for something you've already done, and you don't have money then to do things that you want to or need to do. Okay. Do you have any money in a savings account? Are you able to put additional money in a savings account? Are you being turned over to a debt collector? And I'll tell you that when I was your age, I got to that point. Just before I joined the service, and so they could come repo the kid because I didn't have any way to pay for him. And then he's like, "No, we're not going to do that. We're going to just turn you over to a debt collection agency." Okay. To a point where I had lawyers when I joined the service. I had lawyers in the service telling me that I should probably file bankruptcy because it had really gotten that bad. I ultimately didn't end up doing that. I was able to pay all my debt. Now I couldn't pay it at the same rate and the same timeline that I had originally agreed to, but I was able to talk with all my creditors and we worked through the process, and we got them all paid. Okay. But that happens, when you get behind on payments, your bills, your what you owe gets turned over to a debt collector. Okay. And, are you worried and stressed that you might be losing your home or losing your car? Well, if your stuff starts getting turned over to a debt collector, if you owe on your car, eventually somebody's going to come tow that car away because they're going to repossess it. Or the bank's going to repossess your house and they're going to say, set your stuff out on the street and say, come get it because you don't own the house anymore. Okay. So I guess this question is, are you in debt? Should be more, is your debt a problem? I should have probably titled that one a little different. Okay. But those are kind of questions. Now, hopefully you guys are not in this, in this extreme, especially down here towards the bottom. If you are, and you need some help and some advice, please let me know, and we can get things. We can get you some advice and counseling, and get you to people that can help. If you're not, hopefully this class will give you the tools that you need to be able to understand where you're going, and if you but the bottom line is you're not alone. Okay. The Census Bureau in 2010, now we just did a census in 2020, but all the different numbers for the 2020 census are not out there, not available. Okay. But the Census Bureau for 2010 said 69% of all Americans are in debt, and had an average debt of $70,000. Now, that may seem like a lot, but the reality is, if you own a home, that's probably. I would like to say that I'm currently only in debt for $70,000. But the reality is, the house that I just bought, was a $158,000 house. So I'm in debt for a little bit more than that average. Okay. Consumers with the greatest amount of growing debt were those in the age group of 35 to 45, and a lot of time that is because that's the age group when a lot of folks are buying a house. Typically, younger folks, and now this isn't always, but typically younger folks, even younger married folks, are struggling financially to a point where they can't buy a house. And as a result, they get to that 30, 32, 35 age group a lot of times before they start looking at buying that first new house. And sometimes, they can do it sooner than that. But college age students in the U.S. graduate with an average of $35,000 in student loan. I would hope that the students coming out of Calvary are not reaching that average. I know that the tuition either has gone up or is going up. I'm not sure if it's gone up yet, but the reality is that tuition does go up from time to time. But I also know that even if tuition goes up in Calvary, it still wouldn't be, you wouldn't be paying all of the expenses that would be involved in what it costs to put you through class. The bottom line is Calvary's got a very good set of alumni and donors that pay a lot of good money, that invest a lot of good money in your education. So hopefully you guys are coming away from Calvary and you're not looking at that much debt in student loans. But if you do have student loans at all, that is one way to pay for college. And it's just a fact that a lot of students come away from school with debt. Okay. Credit cards is probably the thing that get to people. How do I want to word this? It's probably the single biggest area where people get themselves in trouble, because they're able to lay that piece of plastic down and get something that meets or satisfies an immediate need or a want without having to pull cash out and pay for it. The problem is every time we use that credit card, there's an interest payment. So, money's not free. The bottom line is money is not free. And when we borrow money, and anytime you use a credit card, that's exactly what you're doing. You're using money that's not yours, it belongs to the bank. And the bank has said, yeah, we'll let you use our money. But in order to use our money, you've got to pay us back in interest. Okay. And it can get pretty ugly. But in 2010, and all of these numbers came, most of them, the student loan debt, it was 2016. I found some updated data on that one. But total credit card outstanding debt ranges from billion, close to $1 billion mark, between 975 billion and 990 billion every year. Okay, now if you have the money to use that credit card, where you use the credit card and you pay it off each month when the bill comes due, that can be considered smart money, because your money is in the bank and it's sitting there, and you're using your debit card, your credit card. The bank is fronting you money, and then when the bill comes due, you pay that money. So you're taking the money out of your account and you're paying the bank back. Some of you know that I used to have a trucking company down in Houston, and that's exactly what I did. I had money in the bank, but I had a credit card that I used for everything. And the reason I used the credit card for everything related to my business was because I got those statements that allowed me to track all of my expenses. So it was a financial decision. It was a business decision that I made to use the credit card to pay for, everything from when I stopped and filled up my gas tank, to if I had to have maintenance done on my truck. Sometimes I was carrying loads that were real close to being the limit of how heavy I could carry on my truck. So I'd have to drive across the scales and get the truck weighed. Any of those types of expenses went on my credit card, and I had a separate credit card for that specifically. But each month when that bill came in, I didn't actually write a check. I started to say I wrote a check each month. I didn't actually write a check. I went online and transferred money from one account because the credit card was with the same bank. So I just transferred money from my business account to pay my credit card account. But it was just as if I was writing a check, okay? But I paid that off every month so that I wasn't having to pay that interest. And that's something the bank does, as long as you can pay it off every month, don't charge that interest. So basically, the bank's just fronting you money, knowing that you're either going to pay them in full, or if you don't, they're going to charge you interest. Okay. So let's see. Come on, there we go. Many people will face a financial crisis at some point in time. It can be overwhelming, but it can also be overcome. I told you the story that Miss Gwen and I, when I first joined the Army, we were overwhelmed with finances, but with some good counsel from some of the folks in the military, we were able. And bottom line is good counsel from folks in the military, but through God's grace and God's love and God's providence, we were able to overcome our financial difficulties. Okay. You guys can read through the rest of this slide. I'm not going to belabor this one. I think, yeah. Okay, so it is 7 minutes after 8 by my clock, by my computer clock. Guys, I got to get something to drink. My voice is getting dry. So let's take a 10-minute break. So let's be back at 7:20. And we'll start up again. Grace, what I'm going to do is I'm going to mute my camera and my microphone. If you want to go ahead and turn your camera off too, when you get back at 7:20, we'll turn the cameras on so I know you're there, and we'll go again at 7:20. Okay? See ya. All right, can you hear me? Okay. So this slide I put in here, the question that we're asking is putting money in savings, okay? And the old boy's got the stop sign up, so he's saying stop putting a whole bunch of money into savings. Savings is good, don't get me wrong, that's what I said earlier. But at this age group, what I find a lot of times is that some people are trying to save money when that's probably not the smartest thing to do with your finances. Okay, once you've got some money in that emergency fund so that you actually have something that you can draw on if you have to, that unexpected emergency expense, then instead of putting a whole lot of money into savings, we need to look at, uh, if you don't have, okay, if you don't have significant savings, okay, and again, my apologies, so if you don't have emergency funds, you want to stop putting money away into savings and build that emergency fund nest first, okay? But if you're paying debt that's more than 10% of your income, in other words, if the debt that you're paying out, the interest that you're paying on your debt is more than 10% of your income, then you're probably not wanting to put a whole lot of money into savings because you want to pay that debt down. Okay, pay that interest bearing debt. Okay, but if you're just paying the minimum amount on your credit cards, that's a, how do I word this correctly without sounding wrong? Paying the minimum amount on your credit card bill is really a scam for the company. I mean this. If you look at, let's say you have a $2,000 credit card debt, and you pay only the minimum amount of what they say your minimum amount payment is going to be, it would take 12, I believe this is what I read before, is that it would take 12 years to pay off your $2,000 debt if you're only paying the minimum amount. And ultimately, you end up paying back almost $6,000 over that 12-year period. Because of the way that interest compounds, you end up paying 3 times as much money back. So paying, if you put money on a credit card, like I was telling you a while ago, it's not necessarily a bad thing, but you have to put money on credit cards wisely and make sure that you've got the funds to pay them off. Okay. But if you're putting money into savings, but your bills are such that your utilities are being threatened to be cut off, if you're not getting ahead, even if you're working multiple jobs, so there's a lot of things to consider there. Okay. So let's say there's some questions we need to ask ourselves to see, are we getting into issues when it comes to our personal debt? So, and how do we go about identifying that debt? Okay. The single best way to do it, and again, this goes back to the council and the folks that the Lord led Miss Gwen and I to back when we joined the service and we were having so much trouble, is that you're going to make a complete list of every bit of credit debt from our debt data you have out there, your credit cards, personal loans, school loans, business loans, if you've got mortgage, okay, what are your bills every month, okay, and you're going to look at principal, interest rates, and monthly payments, okay, paying where your money's going. What ends up being is when you've got more bill than you got month, or more bill than you got money to pay, what you end up having to do is figure out a strategy to pay them. And what we ended up doing was communicating with a bunch of our creditors, and we looked at those ones that were some of our larger bills, and we told them, hey, We're going to pay you the minimum amount each month, but we will pay you. And then we looked at some of those smaller bills and we paid them a little bit extra each month, and we tried to pay them off. And then once you pay one of those small bills that you may only be paying 10 or 12 bucks a month to, but once you pay it off, then you can take that extra 10 or 12 bucks a month and put it to one of the big ones. And you pay another small one off and you put it to one of the big ones. Ultimately, you get down to where all you have is a couple of the big ones left, and you're putting considerably amount more each month into paying now. Okay. Are you adding, any additional outstanding debt? Okay. You add in your minimum monthly payments, and this is kind of where I was talking about, if you've got a house payment that you're making or rent, you have to calculate that in, because, you can't just not make your house payment or your rent payment. You still got to calculate that in. And you got to add your credit cards in, okay? Your student loans, if it's more than this says 10 to 15%, that should probably be 15 to 16%. The reality is, at this age, many times you don't have some of the other debts. So credit card and personal loans, car loans, all of that kind of get rolled up into one chunk. Okay. So it's probably 15 to 16% of should be part of your budget. Okay. You're going to estimate the highest interest loans, or eliminate the highest interest loans, and that's what I was saying. We looked at, and it wasn't necessarily the highest, the biggest bill that we had, the smallest we had. We focused on the one we paid most interest to. What was our highest interest rate? And those are the ones that we tried to pay off first, because those were the ones that were costing us more money each month. Okay, but again, if you have issues, you can call your creditors and negotiate lower interest rates on many times. If you can't, you can have your cards frozen, or I don't have a pair of scissors here with me, but one of the easiest ways to stop using your credit card for stuff is take a pair of scissors to it and cut that credit card up. Okay. So this debt is one of those things that is insidious, and it creeps up on us sometimes, and it gets us to a point where we can't hardly function, and it can get there real quick. So, but let's go back and look at some of the other things that was on that list that we talked about earlier. Look at some of the specific things like the cost of owning a car. The cost of owning a home or renting a home, maybe the cost of attending college or getting married. Now tonight we're going to talk about owning a car, and we're going to at least get started on talking about college expenses. Next week we're going to kind of dedicate the time towards owning a home, because like I said, Ms. Forte is going to come in and speak with us. And she's going to talk to us and spend about an hour talking to us about different things, and then give us time to do some question and answers. So Grace, hopefully you get your microphone fixed before next week. Okay. Are you there around campus? Okay. What I would suggest is that you take your laptop and go in and see Daniel or the guys there in the IT office, because it's probably just office. I can't remember the new guy's name. He's probably not new to you guys anymore because he's been there for a while, but he was new to me as I was leaving. But go see those guys, and my guess is it's probably just a setting on your computer that needs to be fixed. Okay. So we're going to start looking at owning a car. Okay. So we're going to start with the car. The cost of owning a car is a whole lot more than just the sticker price that you see in the window when you go to buy it. Whether you're buying a new car or a used car, there's a lot of other expenses that come into play. Okay, it's nice when you go look at that shopping for a new car. It's exciting. You got that new car smell, and everything is all shiny and new, and even us crusty old farts like me, we like them shiny new baubles too. Okay. But before we sign the purchase agreement, we got to consider all the different things that go into the cost of owning a car. And we have to understand how those costs associate, all the different costs associated with owning a car apply so that we know whether we can afford it. Okay, now I'm going to give you examples that I worked up, and then we're going to watch a video that has basically the same information, but they're going to use a different set of numbers and a different example, so you can see another example worked out. Okay. But basically the first thing you look at when you're going to buy a car is how much does the car cost? Okay, whether you're buying a new car or whether you're buying a used car, whether you're buying it from a dealership or whether you're buying it from somebody a family friend, somebody from church, or whether you're buying it off of eBay. There's lots of different ways. I mean, I still haven't figured out how they do this. Where you buy the car online and they just deliver it to your house and you're buying a car that you've never seen before. I like to put my hands on it, touch it, and kick the tires and make sure everything's good to go before I buy a car. Even a brand new car. I've seen brand new cars come off of those trailers that they haul them on when they get them to the dealership. And those brand new cars got problems too. So, but we got to take all the different costs into play. So we're going to work with some numbers here, and we're going to see is it too expensive to buy a car? Now, the number $37,300 is the number I went searching a few days ago. For what is the median price for buying a new car today. The median manufactured suggested retail price, and it's $37,300. Now, there are a whole bunch of cars out there cheaper than that, and trust me, there's a whole bunch of them out there that's a whole lot more expensive than that. Okay, my daughter just bought a new pickup, and it's twice that. And yeah, she paid more for her truck than I paid for my first house. So, and I hassled her about it too. And she said, "Yeah, well, I live in my truck probably as much as you lived in that house," because she's a realtor and she runs all over the place, meeting up with people and looking at houses. And she definitely needed a big truck. She got a 4-wheel drive because she goes out in the country and looks at people buying ranches and stuff. And the bottom line is, I told her, hey, if you've got the money and you can afford it, if it's in your budget, go for it, But so $37,300 is the median price for a new car today. And I'm going to say, okay, we've been thinking about buying this new car for a while, and we wanted to bring our costs down a little bit. So we whether it's $5,000 in cash or maybe it's $3,000 in cash and they're going to give us $2,000 for our clunker used car. However, we're putting $5,000 down. So the total loan that we're going to take out for our car is $32,300. And again, I did that based on national averages. This is the numbers that came from the website when I was working on the national averages. It was 37.3 with $5,000 down and 32.3 for the national average for the cost of a car. Okay, but there's a lot of other factors that influence our payments. Okay, the single biggest one being the interest rate that they're charged on the car. Now, depending on your credit rating, and that's one of the things Ms. Forte is going to talk to us about a lot next week when it comes to buying a house, is our credit rating. Okay, if you've got an excellent credit rating right now, you can get a car loan for anywhere from 2.8% to about 3.5%. If your credit rating's not quite so good, it's good but not excellent. Your interest rate might be in the the fives, but the national average credit rating right now is going to get you a car loan, a new car loan, at about 7.5%. Now, this is national averages that were taken in 2019. There wasn't any new data for 2020 and 2021. So in 2019, these were the averages. Okay. You can take car loans out for more than 5 years. A lot of people now, in order to get their payments down, are taking car loans out for 6 years and 7 years. You know, you can take them out for 5 years would be 60 months. You can take them out for 72 or 84 months to get your payments down. But again, in 2019, $2,300 with a 7.5% interest rate. You take it out for 5 years. The monthly payment on that is going to be $648 a month. Okay, at $648 a month, you end up over the 5 years. You end up paying back $38,080. So you can see that there's almost $6,000 over 5 years. There's almost $6,000 in money that you're paying back to the bank because they let you have their $32,000 up front. So by the time you pay it off, you're paying them back $38,000. So almost $6,000. Okay, but there's other things that go into buying a car. Grace and Victoria, if you guys could talk to me, I'd have you guys try to give me some ideas now. But since you can't, I'm just going to kind of plug along this evening. Okay, but additional costs that go into buying a car is car insurance. Because anywhere you drive in the United States, you either have to have insurance or you have to be able to prove you have enough money that you don't need insurance. And I'm sorry, I don't know anybody that's got that kind of money. There are people out there that's got it, but I don't know. Do you have that kind of money, Grace? Do you have enough money that you can have a car and not have insurance? Nah, me either. Okay. And I don't care how much money you got to put fuel in it. Okay, whether it's gasoline or whether it's plug-in and you're using electric, you still got to put fuel in it. And every vehicle is mechanical, so there's going to be maintenance expenses. That red pickup that I used to drive on the campus all the time, the other day, my son-in-law and I just replaced the brakes on that truck, and it cost me about but by us doing it ourselves, it saved me almost $1,000 in labor, where I would have had to pay somebody to do those brakes for me if I'd have taken it to a dealership or to a maintenance shop. Okay. Oh, excuse me. And then there's other expenses like registration fees. Every year, down in Texas, every year I have to go to either go to the license branch or do it online. But I have to pay registration fee and property taxes, and depending on where you live, sometimes there's parking expenses or where you work. There's parking expenses that have to be paid. So there's other things to take into consideration. So we're going to take this same car that we bought for $32,300, and we figured out our payment, but this is our monthly payment to the bank is $648 over 5 years. Okay, but let's see what other monthly expenses we have. So we're starting out at $648. Okay, so let's talk about car insurance, because that's the very next one that you're going to have, because you can't get it registered until you got car insurance. Okay. This says car insurance required in most states. I think it's required in every state. I should have typed in every state there. Okay. But the information that I've got on these slides all come from 2018. Again, that was the most current information that I could find. I couldn't find anything for 19 or 20. But the average car insurance in the United States is annually is $1,062. Okay, and that's being generous because the reality is most of you that are 15 and 25 pay more than that. I'm in that $800 range where you guys are going to be in that $1,200 to $1,500 range. Okay, but this is just a national average, and that's what I'm using as I did this model up. Okay, but if you take that $1,062 annually and divide it by 12 months, you end up with $88.50 a month that you need to pay to the insurance company. Okay, so if you see in our chart down there, well, now we've got our monthly car payment. And then our average monthly insurance premium that we've got to pay. So now we're at $736.50. Okay, so that car's not looking quite as valuable now, or maybe it's valuable, but maybe it's not quite as effective for us as far as fitting into our budget. But wait a minute, there's still more expenses. Okay. So let's talk fuel. And again, I went with national averages. Okay, the Bureau of Labor Statistics says consumers spend on average about $1,968 a year, or about $164 a month on gas. Obviously, this was taken back when gas was cheap. Back when we could get gas for $2 and a nickel, as opposed to almost $4 that we're paying for gas now, right? So this number is way out of whack, but again, staying with the model, everything from 2018, 2019, I wanted to stay with that model, okay? Yeah, I filled my gas tank up yesterday and it cost me $74 to fill the gas tank up. Fortunately, I live pretty close to where I work, so I can go for 3 weeks on one tank of gas, but still, it gets expensive. But $164 a month, that's and oil. Yeah, well, oil changes get expensive. And you'll see that in the video that we're going to watch. Okay. So we add that $164 to it, and now we're above $900 a month in expenses to operate a car. Okay. So, and then we got maintenance. Now, if you're buying a brand new car off the lot, and that's kind of the model that we've got going here, a lot of times the dealership's going to give you the first 2 years, no maintenance expenses. Okay. And they may even give you the first few years, not only no maintenance, but you don't even have to pay for the oil change. But eventually you're going to have to start you're going to have to start calculating in some maintenance expenses. Okay. Well, again, I looked at national averages, okay, and to pay for oil changes and to pay for tires and to pay for all those different expenses that you have, maintenance related expenses, the average is about $1,186 a year. If you divide that out, you're going to end up with about $99 a month, okay? So if you go back to that original $648. Well, now for our maintenance and our insurance and our fuel, now we've added $351.50 a month, or now we're at $999.50. So 50 cents shy of $1,000 a month just to be able to have a car and operate it and do the things that we need, that at least we think we need to do. Okay. If you stop and do the math, okay, that means you got to have a pretty decent paycheck. That's on their payment or half payment. So the cost and expense of a car, sometimes when you figure it out like this, and the reason I went through this process is to show you guys that many times buying that new car is not the way to go. You can lessen these prices considerably if you buy a car that's 2 or 3 years old, so that instead of that $32,000 that you're starting off with, well, maybe if you buy a car that's 3 years old, it's only $21,000 instead of $32,000. Well, boom, you've just taken $11,000 or $12,000 right off the top of those expenses. Okay, so I'm gonna put a video on here, and we're gonna watch this video. Now, this video basically is going to do the same thing I just did. It's going to go through a model of what it costs to operate a vehicle, but this guy's going to use some different numbers, okay, to show you that the model works the same. It's just the numbers that he's using are a little bit different. So let's see if I get this right this time. I have to make that full. And I have to stop sharing the slides. And I have to open that video. And I will let the ad play, and then I'll pause it at the end of the ad. Okay. So now I'm going to share. And I want to include the audio. Okay, do you see?
Important decisions to make when buying a car. Do you need a truck for the farm or a small car for the city? How important is gas mileage to you? What color do you want? Once you decide what car you want, figuring out what you can actually afford can seem a bit complicated. Your monthly car payments might be affordable, but you also have to keep in mind other costs you'll have, like insurance payments, registration fees, and unpredictable expenses, such as a sudden hike in gas prices or the need for a big repair. So before you begin to shop around for a car, you might want to take a look at some of these costs so you're not caught off guard. First, let's figure out your budget. On average, people spend about 14 to 16% of their annual income before taxes on their transportation budget. That's a figure that includes all the expenses of owning a car, not just your car payments, but your gas, insurance, maintenance and repairs, and everything else as well. So for our example, let's use this as a guideline and look at what this might be for an annual income of $42,000. To figure out your budget, we'll take 16% of $42,000. That gives you $6,720 a year to spend on your car, or $560 a month. So let's look at the costs involved in getting a new basic subcompact sedan that has a sticker price of about $16,450. Now, for any car, there are plenty of extra things you can get, like satellite radio or a sunroof, which can drive up the price. But we're going to forego the bells and whistles and stick to a basic model. And when you buy a new car, keep in mind that there are often extra fees in addition to what you pay for the car itself. You might have fees for things like documentation and destination charges for getting the vehicle from the manufacturer to the lot. Your registration fees may also be included, which can save you a trip to the DMV. Some of the fees you'll encounter, like registration, are non-negotiable because they are required by your state. But some things, like documentation fees and the base price of the car, may be flexible and open to negotiation, depending on where you buy your car. So let's say that the price of the car and fees, and adding on your local taxes, you're paying $16,750 total. And in this case, you're going to finance the car entirely. That means you're not going to make any down payment or trade in another car. If you get a 6-year loan at a 3.5% interest rate, looking at an online calculator, your monthly payments will be around $260. But financing comes at a cost. In this case, you end up paying about $1,845 in interest on top of that $16,750 of principal over the course of your loan. So if you have the cash, you may consider buying the car outright. Or if you have a few thousand to spend on a down payment, you could lower your monthly payments and save in interest over time. But for this example, let's say you don't, and you've got a $260 car payment. Then there's gas. Let's say this car gets 32 miles to the gallon, and on average you drive about 1,250 miles per month. 1,250 miles divided by 32 miles per gallon gives us about 39 gallons of gas each month. If gas is around $4 per gallon, 39 times 4, we're looking at about $156 a month on gas. There's also your car insurance. Insurance prices are based on a number of factors, including where you live, your driving record, the type of car you're driving, even your job. If you're figuring this out for yourself, you might want to look at an insurance estimator, as rates can vary dramatically. Let's say you use an insurance calculator, put in your info, and see that you'll get a rate of about $100 a month. So adding our monthly car payment of $260 and an estimated gas expense of $156, plus the $100 for insurance, we already have a total of about $516 per month. Now let's look at some more periodic expenses you might have, like regular maintenance. Generally speaking, every 7,500 miles or so, it's that's 1,000 a year. Add that by 7,500 miles, and it looks like you might need to do this about twice a year. And let's say it costs you about $80 or so each time, for a total of $160 per year. Although some new cars come with a service agreement that covers some of these basic maintenance costs for the first few years. Now, going to a shop for regular maintenance can be a hassle, and you may wonder, is it worth it? Well, skipping tire maintenance and oil changes can cost you in the long run. A set of tires might last you longer if cared for properly, and a new set might cost you around $600. Not changing the oil will eventually wear out your engine, which can cost thousands to replace. So that $160 a year may be worth it over time. For the first few years, with a new car, you probably won't need to do much more maintenance than this. If you do, it might be covered by your warranty. You'll also have to re-register your car and probably get it inspected from time to time, depending on your state. This could be once a year or every few years, and can cost $45 to $300 or more. Let's say your registration and inspection will cost about $200 every 2 years, or another $100 per year. So adding $160 for maintenance and another $100 for registration and inspection, you get $260 per year. Divided by 12 months, we've got, well, about $22 per month. And if we take our previous monthly expenses, which were $516, adding 22, we've got $538. Then looking at our original budget of $560, if we subtract $538 for our monthly expenses, that leaves us with $22. So having calculated some of these costs of car ownership, we can see that this car could be inside your budget. Now, you may be thinking about that extra $22 a month. That's $264 a year. Why not accessorize? But having a little extra in your budget to cover unexpected costs is a good idea. It may come in handy if there's a sudden hike in the price of gas, or the insurance goes up. And when warranty runs out, you have to pay any repair you might or maybe even something bigger. So it's a good idea to keep these extra costs in mind when figuring out what you can spend. If your car payments alone put a strain on your budget, you might find yourself the owner of a car you can't afford to drive. And if a new car is too much for your budget, you might consider buying a used car, which we look at in another video.
Okay, can you hear me? Okay. So you can see he kind of went through the same stuff that I did. He talked a whole lot faster than I did, but he just used some different numbers in a different model. But if you look at what he was talking about, 14 to 16% for our transportation expense, okay? Well, I did some real quick math while he was doing that, and our expense of $1,000 a month, basically, in order to be able to afford this at 14 to 16% of our income, that would mean we'd have to have a job that's paying us about $75,000 a year. Okay. Now there are a bunch of jobs out there like that. Don't get me wrong. I just don't know too many kids that are in college that's making that kind of money. Are you making that kind of money, Grace? Oh, you're not? Well, guess what? I'm 60 years old and neither am I. Okay? So, now, guess what? I don't have $1,000 a month car payment either. That red truck that I'm driving, I bought that it's paid off. So the only that I have all those other two payments. So I've still got the insurance, and I've still got the maintenance, and I've still got the fuel. And trust me, the fuel's gotten real expensive lately. Okay, but I've got all those other expenses, but I don't have that monthly car payment to pay the bank because I paid mine off a long time ago. That's the reason I'm still driving that truck and then go buy a new one because I don't want a $900 a month car payment. Neither does Miss Gwen. She told me I can't have one. She didn't tell me I couldn't have a new car. She just told me I couldn't have one that expensive. So, but that's all the kind of stuff that goes into the calculation of can we afford to have a car, and so there's a couple of ways to go about looking at it. You can kind of look at it like I did and say, okay, well, this is the car that I want, and this is the $648 a month, and this is all the expenses that goes with that, and so it's going to cost me $999.50 a month. So if that's what I want, then I need to be making at least $75,000 a year in order to be able to fit that into what is a reasonable, respectable budget that has 14 to 16% of your income going to your transportation costs. The reality, though, most of us aren't going to do it that way. We're going to do it more like the guy in the video, where we're going to say, okay, how much money do we make? He said, okay, we make $42,000 a year. So what's 16% of $42,000 a year? Well, it's 500 and whatever his number was. So they had to go find a car that comes in at that type of a price range. Well, you can pretty much figure what your utilities are going to, or what your gas is going to be. You can pretty much figure what your registration is going to be and what your insurance is going to be. Loan payment. Well, if you know how much your loan payment can be, then you can kind of backwards figure, oh, I can spend this much money on a car. So, it's the same equation, but the question is, are you working the equation forward or are you working the equation backwards in order to get to that same point? Okay. In this case, he worked the equation backwards, and in my case, I kind of worked the equation forward. Okay, I found the car I wanted and worked it forward. No, excuse me, he worked it forward. He said, I've got this much money, now let's work forward and see what I can afford in a car. Where I kind of worked it backwards. I said, oh, this is the car I want, now let's see if I can afford it. Okay, so 6 of one, half dozen of the other. Okay, and you know what? It's 8 o'clock, and again, like I was telling you a little earlier, my voice is tired, my throat's hurting. So before we get into talking about the cost of college, I think I'm going to hold that off and use that for next week. We're going to hit that fairly quickly next week. We'll hit that after Ms. Forte talks to us. So she's going to talk to us for about an hour, and we'll do some questions and answers with her. And then what we will do is we'll take a break, and then we'll come back and we'll hit the cost of college, and maybe address some additional issues once she's no longer in the class with us, where you might have some questions that you didn't necessarily want to ask her, but you'll ask me. So we'll do that. Thank you for being on, Grace, because other than that, I would have had to talk to a blank screen, or talk to Victoria's avatar with the kitty cat. Is coming through. But for those of you watching the video, and I promise this evening, I will make sure that it's posted and there and saved and everything this evening before I get up and walk away from my desk. I walked away last week and did a couple of things and came back and posted it, and I thought it posted, and had it not been for one of the students sending me an email over the weekend saying, "Hey, I tried to watch the video and I can't find it," I wouldn't have known. So if you guys run into that problem at all in this class or any other class that you take with me, where you have a problem and you can't see the video, somebody shoot me an email, or I think on my syllabus you've got my phone number where you can send me a text message. Somebody shoot me an email or a text message and say, "Hey, for whatever reason, can't see the video." Okay. But other than that, we're going to go ahead and call it a night, and we will move forward next week. We're talking about the cost of going to college. And again, we'll hit on that pretty quick because most of you guys are already there and you've kind of figured out what the cost is to go to college. But the interesting thing in my research in setting this class up is how many parents don't realize what college costs because they're still remembering what it cost them to go to college. And where the problem is that over the last 18, 19, 20 years, the cost of college has gone up a bunch. Okay. And then, like I said, we have a guest speaker who's going to talk with us next week, and we're going to talk about all things considered with buying or renting a house. Okay. Let's close out in a word of prayer, and we will call it a night. Father, we thank you for this day. And I always, Lord, thank you for the students of Calvary, for the institution of Calvary, and the fact that you've set that institution line where we're, I'm all the way down in Texas, but I'm still able to commune and be with our students from Calvary. And I just thank you for not only for the institution, but for the students and their willingness to learn and adapt to this alternative way of teaching and instruction. And Lord, I pray that the things that I'm putting out will strike a chord with our students as they move forward and they work to build budgets and financial plans for themselves as they go through their lives. We ask all this in your name, Lord, and trust that you will take care of myself and the students, and that we can all be back here safe next week. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay, again, the first paper's due tomorrow evening by midnight. Please get the papers in. My goal is to get them graded this weekend and back to you in quick order. But don't wait until you get your papers back from me to put your projects together for your videos, because you need to do the videos this next week and have them turned in by this time next week. Okay. You guys have a good week, and I will, if I don't see you next Wednesday, I'll at least be on here talking so that you can see me. Okay? Have a good night.